The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. This is episode 65. It's hard to believe we've been doing this podcast and live event for so long. It's been just a joy to be able to give back to the Agile community and to be able to share experience and everyone who's participated over this 65 episodes that goes out to the rest of the planet. And I know that as I look at the podcast statistics and I see like a pocket of technology people sitting over in, say, Eastern Europe or in other areas across the planet, it's just amazing to me that our voice does echo out into the rest of the community. It helps the community a lot, and that's part of the reason why this particular event is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. Their investment in us in order to reverberate around the planet, we couldn't do it without them, and I strongly recommend that everyone go off and take a look at them. If you're not a member of the Agile Alliance, it is a set of practitioners that got together in order to better the industry, and so this is a place where you can go learn, be able to network with other individuals. There's a lot of events that are going on, the lean coffee sessions, or we do the meet and greets and other things. All of this is about building community and to build a strong Agile network for you. It's not about us selling anything. We are, in fact, our goal here is to give back to the community. A lot of early days in my Agile experience is that there were people who pulled me aside and said, hey, let me teach you about this or teach you about that. And that's really the vibe that we're trying to go create with the whole thing here. So we're joined with a cast of characters that kick us off every month, and a few of them are on vacation this week. So Diana is here, Jorgen this week as well, and myself, Hendrik and Jana, they're on vacation this week. So hopefully they're resting up and having a really great time recharging their batteries. I do have a special note because if anyone's looked at my LinkedIn, you're probably, if you've known me for some time, you know that I've been with the Agile Alliance for the last 2 years as an employee of the Agile Alliance. I also have had my business that's been sitting in the background called New Agility. And just recently, I made the choice to go join Dell Technologies. I'm going to be their Director of Agile Transformation over there. So there's a couple of things that are going to be occurring, but they're really nothing different. That the arrangement between Agile Alliance as our sponsor and New Agility, that arrangement isn't changing at all. So we're going to be continuing forward with doing the Agile Coaching Network. Agile Alliance is continuing to be the sponsor. We are still keeping the same goals. We're not trying to go off. And even the New Agility portion of it, that organization that I've owned for the last 5 years, that is actually being converted into a nonprofit. So the goal is that the Agile Coaching Network as a structure will still live and be owned by New Agility. But New Agility is not selling products and services. It actually hasn't sold products and services for the last 2 years since I joined the Agile Alliance. So I just wanted to throw that out there to make sure that everyone understood. One of the things that I'm very curious about, because as I've been learning up new things over the last couple of years, and we're coming into this post-COVID timeframe, I'm really interested on one is, where are you learning Agile at? Where are the places that you are finding the best amount of knowledge and things that you can figure out how to maneuver this large space that we have in Agile? Are you doing in-person events? Are you doing this year? Are you going to do just mostly online events? Are you looking for more like on-demand and e-learning courses? And specifically, I wanted to find out what topics are we learning and what should we be paying attention to? And so I want to hear from the audience in particular about what would you recommend to others that we should focus and look at today? Because I'm really curious to hear about maybe potential things that I should go off and go learn, or others in the community that should be paying attention to. And then lastly is your company, and I've heard just rumors because I've been talking to a lot of people around, oh, my company doesn't pay for this, or my company is paying for it. I'm just kind of curious, are you on your own for your learning, or are you in the space of having a company that's investing in you? And I'm just trying to figure out those 2022 trends. So with that, to kick that off, where are we learning and these questions? Diana, would you like to take a first stab at this?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good to hear you all again, even though I can't see you. Yeah, I'm very cautiously looking at incorporating in-person conferences again for myself. I'm not quite ready to host one yet, or suggest that we organize one for any reason. But I am getting ready to put my toe in the water. So certainly a couple of the Agile Alliance events, the XP conference in Europe, and the Agile conference this summer. I'm looking at attending both of those in person if I can. And I've also then coming up sooner than that is the Organization Design Forum conference, where I go for my own personal professional development. I'm not a speaker or anything else there. So I've got kind of a mix, and I'm watching very carefully the news about COVID, and making sure that everything that I sign up for in person is something that I can easily back out of later if things go sideways in terms of the pandemic. So yeah, I'm a cautious risk taker around these things, but I am so longing to get back to seeing people in person and having in person the kind of spontaneity of conversation that you can have when you're in person, and the way you can connect outside of sessions. I'm looking forward to that. That said, I'm also going to be attending online conferences like the Agile Open conferences. The Agile Open Northwest is coming up. April will probably talk about that more. And others of those kinds of things that I know are structured in such a way where I'm not just a passive sitter and listener, but where I can engage more. Because for me, that's the killer with online events. If I just have to sit and listen, there's no value for me there. And so anyway, that's where I'm going. In terms of on-demand e-learning, I'm more looking at, for the Agile Fluency Project, I'm more looking at not on-demand e-learning, but scheduled e-learning, and kind of sticking with that for a while until we see what else shakes out. So that's sort of, and then meetups and those kind. I mean, I always learn things from going to meetups and things. So beyond conferences, there are other opportunities. So that's me.
Yeah, I just want one thing to just from a clarification, because the one thing that's always impressed me about you is that when you go to events, you're always soaking things in. And when you mentioned there's an event you're going to for your own personal development, for somebody that I just look up to, what compels you to go to that particular event? I'm just curious.
Well, it's a sort of an Agile adjacent area that I've always been interested in. I served on the Organization Design Forum board for a while, so I know the richness that goes on at that conference, and the intersection between when we're working with Agile transitioning, which is the way I like to think about it, when we're looking with those adoptions and transitioning to Agile, organization design and the structure, how we adapt the structures in our organizations, is always central. And so I find a lot of good information working with the folks who are focused professionals in the organization design arena. And I have a lot of respect for them for hanging out. I chaired that conference one year, a few years back. So I'm familiar with it. I know what's going to be going on. I know it'll be rich. And I don't know that I would take that leap if I didn't feel pretty confident about what I was going to get there. Yeah, and every year I invest in my own professional development in one way or another. And so I budget that for myself. And so this year, that's one of the things that I will do. Probably later in the year, I'll do something further because I just feel like investing. I mean, I'm my product. I'm I'm my service, right? And so if I'm not constantly improving myself professionally, I'm not continually improving my product and service. So
Yeah, not to sound like a fanboy, that's what I've always liked about you. So let's see, April. What about you? What are you going for this year? I know you're running a few events.
Yeah, I'm a serial organizer, but I just want to, yes, and my dear friend Diana, all the things she said is all true. For me, my foray into conferencing and that whole seeing the continuous learning scene was because I wanted to own my own learning, and the way to do that was to be a contributor of it, instead of just like expecting the organization that I was a part of or to pay for my learning. That's how I began this. And for now, for me, I learn definitely open space is how I learn, and I learn about all sorts of different things because people from different communities creep up in open space, and that's always a joy for me. Is to as someone, I guess, I was told like a more artisan or Renaissance person who's grabbing information from different communities to continue that learning journey. It's always been quite a blessing to learn from someone other than myself, other voices. I believe that people, other people is where I can capture learning through conversation, through their thoughts and ideas. It's so rich. That's what excites me the most when I think about our Agile community. I always say, when people say, who are you excited about? I'm like, the new voices, because we're going to learn something new from those new voices. That's what excites me, and that's what drives me, is the new voices and how they might see something from a different perspective to help us keep moving on this journey for agility.
Awesome. I think one of the things I noted when I was taking my daughter hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail, and she was a pretty young hiker. She was, about 8 years old. But, one of the things that we figured out is that we needed to stop more often because everything was new to her. We were just marching as fast as we could to the destination, and she would stop and find things that we would never think about. And I've always brought that into my philosophy with coaching or at events, because the people with the just beginning their journey with this have such spectacular insights that we can learn from. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I fully agree with that. Jorg, what about you? What are you learning? What should we be learning, and what are the opportunities that you're going to be diving into this year?
Yeah, I don't have a set schedule at all. So I'm doing a lot of things on opportunity, what fits and what pops up. So I don't have a fixed plan. But what I always try to do, and it doesn't really matter whether what I discover comes from a discussion like this one, from a conference, or from an interesting blog, or wherever, I always try to map it to something that I can give to somebody else, because that really amplifies the learning for me. If I don't manage to formulate, that's the story I discover, that's what's relevant for us, what do you think, then my brain doesn't fully consume what I'm hearing. So I always try to pick up points that I can bring to other people, and then their reaction more often than not enlarges my view on things and opens up the next question. And that can be from quite diverse angles of view. So nothing too concrete, but really curious to see what the year brings.
So you tend to take more of the exploratory approach, and somebody
Yeah.
might throw a book at you, and you'd go, "Oh, that's an interesting thing. I should go dig into that."
Yeah,
I'm a,
exactly.
I'm a little bit into that same space as well, so I appreciate that as well. A couple of comments that are online. One of them was from Dennis. Dennis said something about vulnerable populations, and in that space. What do you guys believe that when we talk about vulnerable populations and in-person events, what should we be paying attention to in that space? April, Dan, or
For me is equitable access. In that space, for me, learning is shared. And as a serial organizer in all the spaces that the holding is always looking at how might we create space for this other soul to be a part of it. I find it very vital that the conversation is more rich. I know people love in person, but there's something to be said about virtual that has gifted people, and that is people all over the world. That I feel that the Agile community has definitely been quite a bit stronger in some ways because we've now given access to so many people, and I've seen the benefit, how others have benefited from this and grown careers in other parts of the world that they didn't have opportunity to do so previously. And that it is definitely something that I would say one of the gifts of the pandemic, if we can indicate any of the gifts, is that we have allowed the world to grow smaller, and that's by giving them opportunity for learning, free learning or affordable learning. Things have become quite more affordable for people. That I can be, maybe someone on the call is in Germany, I can be with them in Germany, I can be with them in South Africa or Ghana or the Netherlands, and so on and so forth, and that we have access to one another's ideas, and we're not limited with simply an American perspective on different things, and that creates more space.
That's an interesting poll to take. So everyone who's listening right now, if you think that that online events from an accessibility perspective and a cost, and I'm going to throw the question out is, do we believe that the in-person event space is just too expensive and out of reach for me to go attend? If you agree with that they're too expensive and you can't attend these things, just raise your hand real quick. I'm just kind of curious as a poll. We have about 100 or 120 people here today, and as I'm looking through here, the question is, are they inaccessible and too expensive for you to attend? And it looks like about 50% right now. Thank you for all of that. I'm going to go ahead and put all the hands down. So from an accessibility perspective, I mean, what are ways that we could improve that for the Agile community? I'm just kind of curious, Diane, or April, what would be ways that we can make it easier for people to attend? And I understand there's costs associated with putting on these events, but what are different ways that we can approach this?
Well, I have some thoughts about that. I mean, have attended a number of conferences where I am far from wealthy, but I am not in the position that of the folks who had to put their hand up to say, I just can't afford to go. I mean, I make some choices. I can't go to everything, and I can't afford to go to everything. And so I make choices about the things I can go to. But I know that that's not possible for a lot of folks, and just from an affordability standpoint. And there are other issues at play here as well, obviously, but just starting from there. So there are a few conferences I've gone to where I've had the opportunity to pay for myself and pay for someone else to go, which allows, which makes possible more discounted seats and things like that for other folks. I mean, maybe me paying for 2 seats allows the organizers to give me a seat and then give 2 other people a seat at a half price discount or something like that. So I leave it up to the organizers to decide how they want to manage that. But those kinds of things, the problem with that is that somebody has to step up and say, I can't afford this. And sometimes people are embarrassed to do that, which is kind of too bad. I mean, at this point in the world, we are all aware of the vast inequalities and privilege around financial standing. And from my point of view, if you can't afford it, you can't. I have been in that place, actually. I spent some of my time when I was raising my children in very restricted circumstances. And I know that sometimes what you have to do is, look for the opportunities that you can take that help you get a leg up. Also, I know that there are conferences that want to attract a more diverse audience, either geographically or because of inequalities in the geographic area that they're in, or whatever, racism, sexism. And so, sometimes there are special discounts. We will give you a special discount if you will bring your perspective to our event, because we need to hear from you. And it's not about doing them a favor. It's about making sure that the conference is getting all the richness it can by having all the perspectives available that are needed for a truly diverse solutions to arise out of a community. So I think if we begin to think about things differently, there are a lot of ways that we can manage these things, and there are people who are doing it creatively all around the world. So I just start paying attention to what are the people doing that is solving this problem. And as a speaker, I look for conferences that I know are going to figure out how to make things open for as many people as possible. And that's part of my responsibility as a speaker.
And I think that's really cool because, the ability, and again, you just increased my fanboy with you, but the fact that you're using your position of worldwide speaker and saying that if you're bringing me in, you need to do a few things, like give a ticket to somebody, or that's just cool. Mm-hmm. And I think more speakers should do that. I mean, I've never really considered that as a number of different talks that I've given, to actually ask for that. Thank you for that. So that's great advice.
Right. If I could add on to that, is that one of the oldest open spaces, like here in the U.S., is Agile Open Northwest, and they're working on doing a better job about it. But they definitely offer, and it's happening next month, opportunities for people who need to come at a reduced rate or different things like that. That's available. And I also wanted to indicate that just as Diana was speaking about, 2 conferences that I organize, I do just that and address having people like have a suggested ticket price, but also people can get free tickets and just donate and pay what they can. And that way they don't have to request and contact me and say, oh, can I get this special rate or anything like that. It's really built on trust. And what I found is that people like Diana, they'll donate if they can, and some people get a free ticket, and maybe some people can't afford it and they'll just grab a ticket, but I'm not concerned about that. That I think it's a washout. That I think in the most part, people are honest, and they'll give what they can, or if they really can't afford it, they will. And we also understand this is a part about creating an equitable space globally, is that, as I always say, that $50 US is not the same in Nigeria or China or other different places in the world. And we have to allow for people to make that correction personally for them, right? And that there are creative ways that you can do about it. And it all depends. Well, a lot of the open spaces, most of them are not for profit, right? Even for profit things, someone who does training, I'll do territory discounts and making sure that they're not paying US prices, but they'll pay for the price for an area. I would never want someone not to attend and have an opportunity for learning because of money.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. We almost like we need a logo on these websites to say we're part of something that believes in X, so people understand that.
if I may, because we got stuck a lot on the money question, but there was another take on your question that was accessibility by travel. So how to keep things local is probably as well interesting, because Diana mentioned children. There could be as well sick people in the family that just keep you from moving far away. So one interesting thing is to localize things and probably globalize the input and just localize the discussion. So one idea, just maybe copying from the opera, there are things like seminar masks and small ones. They actually could bring people very locally together to discuss things that are being presented on a different stage. And then you just need a feedback loop to get all these discussions together again for the big learning.
Oh yeah,
But that might be a way to approach this distancing problem for being there.
I love how we're engineers and we get right into the fixing the problem, which I love.
No way around that one.
Yeah, Anne, what do you have on this?
So I was one of the people who voted earlier that most of the conferences are cost prohibitive for me, especially as an individual. I wouldn't be able to do it if my company didn't subsidize me in some way for that. And I'm fortunate that I have been granted that ability more than once, but I have to do so in competition with other people in my area. So that it's a real privilege to be able to go, even though I work for an enterprise company. What I've found over the last few years, my favorite ways to get new information were a couple of conferences that were built to be virtual first, to be digital first. They had fantastic opportunities. The two that I really liked were Agile Virtual Summit and Agile Online Summit. They had fantastic leaders. I think Diana actually spoke at one point. They were fantastic. They are free and or like you pay to have the longer access to the content after the event. That made it the information so much more available to my colleagues at my company as well as other people. I love that about it. But the challenge with not having a conference where you are physically separated from your day-to-day work is that I did a lot of my day-to-day work alongside it, and I don't think I got as much out of the conference because I was context shifting too much. And so that was definitely a learning opportunity for me on how to succeed with that, but they're definitely in my plan for learning this year. I do want to go to another external conference because just more to learn and more to see, and having new ideas spark by being in new places and hearing new things. So I do want to include that in my plan, but those virtual conferences are definitely in my plan as well.
I'm kind of curious, when your company sends you off to one of those events, do they require that you come back and teach everyone everything that you've learned?
It's not uncommon expectation.
What I always found with that is, and I'm not sure if you've had the same experience, but because you got chosen to go and you come back with all this great information and everyone's standing there with their hands folded going, well, I didn't get to go. I'm not listening to you. For whatever reason, people have that animosity that they didn't get the chance to attend, and they just shut down their ability to hear what you've actually experienced, which is unfortunate.
Ray, I'd like to just chime in here for a second, because sure. I wonder if some of the people attending today are in transition themselves, or have left at one company or looking at other companies. Always remember, when you are negotiating your salary, your perks, your benefits with a new company, or if your present company is trying to induce you to stay and not leave in the Great Resignation, the permission to attend a certain number of conferences a year is something you can get built into your employment contract. A certain amount of time to go to online conferences that maybe don't cost as much, a certain amount of time to go to in-person conferences if that's your bag and you want to be able to do that. So if you are unlike me, if you are an employed person, that's always something that people forget, that they can negotiate a training and development budget for themselves for attending conferences and trainings, and have that be part of their package. And I think a lot of people don't know about that, don't forget about it, whatever. But keep that in mind, because that's a huge benefit, and it's an ongoing one.
As a manager of people, I can tell you that during development discussions, that it's really important that if somebody wants to go to an event that they tell me about it, because when we do the annual budgeting process, I can factor that in and I can put it into it, versus if it's after, unfortunately being in Fortune 100 companies, if it wasn't in my annual budget, then I got to go scraping for it someplace. And so I fully agree that not just in the pre-employment, but also on your annual employment, when you're doing your development plan, say that, look, this conference is important to me. I think I should attend this, and really have that discussion with your managers as well, is important. Sheila?
I would prefer to just attend things online, because during the pandemic, I've been able to participate in conferences in India, in Indonesia, in Singapore, in parts of Africa. There is no way that I would be able to get the approval to travel to these things. But I've been able to get perspectives from other parts of the world and learn about what they have in common with everybody else and what are the challenges that are different. I've also talked to a few people who were in places like Russia, not often, but occasionally. And I'd rather have that broader perspective than go to something that's relatively local. The other thing is, when you go to something in person, it's not just the cost of the conference itself, it's the cost of the travel. It's also the time commitment that you're away from whatever your job is to some degree. Now, if you're working remote, yeah, you're not as away from it as you would be otherwise, but you are away in the sense that you're not as available. And you have to plan around that. And for people who are going back into an office setting, it's the same thing it's always been, that you're going to be relatively inaccessible for not just the time of the conference, but the time around the conference where you might want to be networking, and the travel time. So you have to plan it like a separate project way ahead of time. Whereas if you're just jumping into things remotely, especially if they're in different time zones, that may not really interfere very much with your regular day-to-day job responsibilities. So to me, that's a better option.
Well, thank you for that. I don't disagree at all. And having attended many virtual events over this last year, yeah, I've loved being in all of these countries this year. It's been great. Scott, what do you have on this?
Well, the things I put in the questions, some people have already mentioned, that the hotel rooms and the venue parking costs and travel are a significant cost issue. And there's nothing that, people coming up with more clever schemes for the conference fees is going to fix that. I mean, the hotel charge is what they charge. I stopped going, of course we haven't had any a couple of years, but I stopped going regularly at the one that was in Washington a few years ago, where there was nothing anywhere near it as an option to stay, and the room rates were over $200. Now, I'm not going to come to a 5-day conference and pay over $1,000 just to be able to have a room to sleep overnight. And there's nothing, there was no other option from that point of view. So I stopped. I just didn't go that year. And like I said, lowering the cost of the registration, that'd be nice. But I think that's not going to hit it with a lot of these once a year big thing in one place with 2,000 people, if it's going to be that way again this year. I've got some talks put in for this coming one this summer, but I can tell you I won't go unless I'm there as a speaker and get my conference fee at least taken care of. I just could never afford it. I'm an independent person. I don't have a company paying for me. And I'm semi-retired and I work part-time, so there's no way I could do that. I do agree. I'd like to see more local things, well-supported local things. And I like online conferences. I think one thing though that I've seen is it's a single Zoom login, so you get the people that you get. Maybe someone can think about the fact of having an online conference. Maybe it's just to last a day, but having multiple tracks, and each track has a separate Zoom login. So you could move between tracks. your choice wasn't, well, whoever they pick, that's who I need to listen to, and I don't have any choice. So that might be an interesting way, I think, to perhaps do online things. And then the last thing I put in the question was this issue of manager needing, you mentioned a manager needing to know if people want to take training. Well, my question was, why doesn't the manager put training and conference money in their budget without having to wait for someone to ask for it, on the assumption they want it there so they can encourage people to do it?
I have no disagreement with that at all. I mean, I used to put in, a sizable amount of budget of per person that they each had an ability to pick an opportunity. We couldn't fund all the opportunities, but, making sure that it was there, not just with the dollars, but also not to ramp up the project so much that where they don't have the time to go do it. Because I think one of the bad patterns that I see people going to these even the big pricey events, is I see the poor people sitting off into the corner with their laptop open, calling into a meeting because they have to be at a meeting and doing work and the conference at the same time. And it's just like they're losing the immersion.
I do training classes, online training classes. And yeah, that often happens. People will show up late because their meetings are running over in the middle of the class. They have to not come back from a break, and I don't know where they've gone. And I find out later on, they were pulled away to do this. So yeah, I understand that one plenty. I see that happen almost every class I teach. Somebody runs into that problem.
Which is unfortunate. Yeah. Well, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. How about Sheila E? Are you there?
There's like so much to unpack with what everybody has said here, but I just wanted to, and going back to all of it, I love learning in all these different ways. I am really looking forward to Agile 2022 in person this year. I do miss being in person and in-person networking. I find it to be a lot better in casual learning. I tend to learn things just having casual conversations in the halls with people, and that I kind of miss when doing online work. As far as the accessibility and the tickets, the one thing I wanted to note is we did a Women in Agile conference last year, and one of the things that we did to help with that, and it was a nominal fee that we were giving, but we still thought that it would be good for anybody who felt that they didn't want to pay this or didn't have the money to pay the fee. We asked people if they, when they paid for the ticket, we had an optional, donation to help others attend. And we took that money that came in from people, and we did get people giving money to help other people attend the conference, and handed out free tickets to people. And that worked really well. And we just wanted to make it more accessible to people who may not be able to afford the fee. And from a standpoint of some of these other conferences, I know that they're so pricey that, you might be able to get a few free tickets versus the several that we did, but it's a good way to go about it.
Cool. Thank you for that. That's all great advice. Crystal, are you there?
So I just wanted to share my experience with the online conferences. I do think that they're more accessible, but I've run into the problem where I've experienced burnout because I thought I could, do more with working and being on all the online meetups and conferences and things like that. So I wanted to add that to the point of letting your manager know. Because once I started letting my manager know, we were able to work together and kind of balance out my schedule so I don't kind of get burnt out, because when things are online, it kind of makes you feel like you can do it all. It's like a it makes you feel like you can do it all, and you don't realize with all the videos and things like that how burnt out you can become. And another point I wanted to bring up was I was able to do like a presenters review for the South African Scrum Alliance conference. And at the end of that review, they gave us free tickets, and I made the assumption that it was going to be in person. So I just assumed I can't travel to South Africa. And as soon as I found out it was online, I was relieved and was like, okay, now I can actually do this. So I think the travel aspect of it is a big hindrance, because I just kind of assumed if it's in South Africa, I wouldn't be able to go. Those were the 2 points I wanted to just share with you guys.
Well, I appreciate both of those.
I think from my side, I've come across people who, the problem is not that there's no money for attending, whether online or on-demand learning. It is rather they don't have the motivation. So I think one of the things that can help is creating that opportunity for people to understand that they can actually expand to new learning. Particularly, I remember when I was moving away from my traditional project management into Agile. So it took quite a lot for me to be motivated to try another way of doing things. So perhaps it may be, making people to know that things are changing, and as such, there is the need for them to try new way of doing things. And then the other bit of my contribution is around, managers giving people that chance to learn new things, because sometimes it's also very challenging when you are in an environment that is not ready to change. So you get engrossed into the old way of doing things. So it's just about adapting and making people realize the changes we are in and the need for new learnings to enable them become more relevant. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for your insights. I appreciate you sharing that. Catherine, are you there?
It's good to chat. I was going to add my voice to those saying that, yeah, the online or virtual conferences have opened up new opportunities for learning, and I'm grateful for that. And I have a coworker who has mobility issues, and attending virtual meetings, virtual conferences has been really very much opening new opportunities for her. So it's not just price, it's also just the logistics of getting a human body that doesn't move very easily, to learning. But that said, I got to agree that the beauty of being at a conference in person is just the random stuff. And trying to learn Agile from reading is almost like trying to learn how to play basketball or bridge by reading the book. There's a whole level of human interaction that I think we all benefit by experiencing rather than trying to understand it by reading words or even trying to do it online. I think we're going to wind up having to do the buffet of options because not everyone's going to be able to benefit otherwise.
Right.
So that just adds more challenges for organizations such as Agile Alliance, because you have finite resources and the number of options for providing education and outreach just increased an awful lot. So I'm guessing that part of the reason for this conversation is just to figure out what options Agile Alliance would be wise to continue to support and, maybe improve what you've been doing, which I think has been great.
I appreciate those words. Actually, the goal of this was, I think there are a couple people from the Agile Alliance on this call, but I think that the goal of, if you think of the mission of the organization, is to educate people on how to do Agile well. And yeah, we've had that big conference and event that we've all loved to go attend every year, and it's going to happen again this year, which is great. But I think that the interesting part of it is, we're entering this phase of where I've got to meet a whole bunch of people that I would have never met if we didn't expand into the online space and some other areas. And I do agree the serendipity is the thing that I'm most addicted to at those big events, because I learn so much in the hallways, and so far the hallways haven't been replaced yet very well in the online space. We've tried, they still haven't been replaced. So yeah, and I think what'll be interesting just in general is, and I do reach out to the people that get left behind in the learning. And I think part of the reason why Agile sometimes doesn't happen very well in companies is that we only send a couple people. They don't have the life-changing experience. I want to see more of that being created personally. I think it's a challenge for us as coaches. How do we go create those spaces? And I think it's going to be a challenge moving even more forward after we return potentially to in-person events. And then all those people that we were talking to are no longer there. And that kind of makes me a little sad. And I want to just see how we expand that personally, is where my head's at. So just with the last few minutes that are left, and I'm going to go back over to April and Diane and Jorg. You got a shout out about what is your one thing that you got to go learn in 2022. And I know that I'm just throwing that blankly at you, and you might draw a blank or whatever, but I'm going to still do it anyway. So any one of you are welcome to just go off and say, what am I learning?
Well, I think the main thing that I'm learning, and that I have learned over the last couple of years and continue to learn more and better about, is how to manage the both and. It's not, are we going to have in-person conferences or are we going to have virtual only conferences? It's how are we going to manage all these needs? And maybe there's some third kind of conference we haven't even thought about yet. But how do we keep expanding the pool of ways to make it possible for people to learn the things they need to learn to have satisfying work lives? And so I'm just always curious about that, and will be alert for who's talking about that and how can we learn more about that.
Awesome. April?
Great question. One of the challenges that I have took up this year, and for an open space, of course, that we're running around the future of work in May, 24 hours, is how every language is the right language. I'm going to experiment with that as we become more open and global. I'm going to see how can we create more inviting and more inclusive spaces in regards to language, and figure out, can we make that possible? I think we can figure it out, but I'm going to experiment with that and learn that to create even more open spaces.
That's groovy. Jorg, how about you?
And you got me thinking there. So I just discovered that probably there is a learning opportunity for me with my team, and I want to really learn what is the energy that propels people starting into their career, not to make unnecessary mistakes, and not by preventing them, but by strengthening them. Because I have the good fortune to have a few very young people just joining my team who took extremely great first steps. And I want to know why they did it, and try to find something systematic in there. And otherwise, I definitely want to know what April is doing in terms of language. I'm so extremely curious on what you said.
Yeah, we'll have to bring her in on a different topic to actually go through that, because I'd like to hear how those experiments turn out as well. We are at the top of the hour, and as always, this has been a spectacular conversation. I was only planning on spending about a half of the session talking about this, but we had just so many people's hands go up and wanted to share what they had in their experience with this, and I couldn't cut it off. So the next event's going to be on Friday, March 25th, 2022. I will be myself, drinking through the water hose and joining Dell Technology and trying to go figure out where the restrooms are. Actually, I'm working remotely 100%, so I know exactly where the restroom is in this new job. As everyone has talked about, at least on the Agile Alliance site, as you know, that there is still the early bird pricing. If you have the opportunity to come to Nashville, I've been sneak peeking underneath the looking at who's the potential people that might be chosen as speakers. What a great list of people that are going to be sharing their experience. And I do recommend for you to attend that event. It's going to be, I think, fairly good one. The other one that's, I think, just going to be virtual, of course. I do want to give a call out to, since I live in the Pacific Northwest, the Agile Open Northwest event. Always a great event to go attend. I've always walked away from those sort of just with my head heavier, because I've learned so much. And if you've ever been to open events, there's just so many topics going on. It's just amazing, and terrific discussion groups that go on. The other one is also XP, and XP is happening in Copenhagen this year. You can go up to the agilealliance.org website. I look forward to continue to learn with you as we go in through the rest of 2022. And with that, I hope you guys have a spectacular month. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.